you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz! I'm here today to review the 1997 indie comedy film The Daytrippers, starring Hope Davis, Stanley Tucci, Parker Posey, Liev Schreiber, and Mears and Pat McNamara, directed by Greg Mottola. I remember this film when I was younger. I think this was officially released in 96, but it got into a wider release in 97. And this was a surprise hit back then. Now, you're probably looking at the box office on IMDb if you really care about this movie, and looking at it and going, it just made $2 million. That's really not a big deal. Well, this movie was made for a little over $600,000. And this had no marketing budget. I think they had one trailer that came out. This made a good amount of money. I would have to imagine that the marketing, if the budget was $600,000, the marketing probably had to be around $800,000, if that. Like, it might have been very little. So this actually made some money, and the actors and the director made kind of a name for himself. Greg Mottola did a lot of different movies after that. I think he still directs to this day. You definitely see Stanley Tucci a lot. Liev Schreiber, Hope Davis is acting a lot in a lot of smaller roles. Parker Posey was a big indie darling in the 90s. If there was a hit indie film, Parker Posey was pretty much in it. What did I think of The Daytrippers? Let's find out. Let's get to the review of The Daytrippers, directed by Greg Mottola. Okay, so before we get into the review, let's go over the plot. Eliza is married to Lewis. Eliza is played by Hope Davis. Lewis is played by Stanley Tucci. And they are in a believably happy marriage. One day, Eliza is cleaning up the house, and she sees a love note that is addressed to Lewis. And she decides that maybe I gotta find out what this note is all about. And she decides on that from her family, with her controlling mother and her dad, and her sister and her boyfriend. They all decide to get in the car and drive to Long Island and confront Lewis about this note. And that's essentially the movie. It's a very thin blot on this one. But, okay, so my first point of The Daytrippers is, this is definitely a 90s indie film. And what do I mean by that is this. Like, 90s indie film, there was a big boom in independent films. It really started around the 90s with the new queer movement, but it really went into overdrive when Pulp Fiction became a huge hit. After that, a lot of indie films started getting a lot more attention. The Daytrippers, even though it only made it $2 million, was one of them. And the thing that was popular around that time in indie films were comedies, specifically this type of comedy, which is a comedy that is about basically quirky characters, but this type of independent film from the 90s was pretty common. Basically, a bunch of characters who are, some of them, despite them being in, like, say, middle class or lower class upbringings, are very verbose. They talk very ironically. They talk with a lot of wit. And that was pretty common around that time. And The Daytrippers is definitely one of those comedies. It's also done very cheaply. The film is set mostly in a station wagon. You definitely feel that it's much more of a homegrown movie than it really is. It definitely has that type of feeling of that film. So if you remember the 90s indie films and the 90s indie comedies, this is one of them, and this is probably one of the more famous and more loved ones. So if you watch it again, you're probably going to get some nostalgia from that. My next point is, this has very thin and unlikable characters. I gotta say, from this film, I am actually surprised how very little there is to these characters, and how much, for the most part, I do not like them. It really comes down to, I think the line of from likable to unlikable is, there's one side where I just don't care about the character, and then there's the other side where I can't stand the character. And the ones where I don't care about are basically the main character, her husband, and then the father. And then the ones that I cannot stand are Parker Posey's character, her boyfriend played by Liev Schreiber, and the mother. The mother is the worst in this movie. She is so annoying and really gets on my nerves throughout the entire film. Just utterly unlikable, and someone that I just did not want to hear more from. And when the second half of the film pretty much relies on that character, it became a chore to sit through. And since I didn't like the characters, and this is supposed to be about a specific character of which I could care less about, it was really hard to actually identify and to really root for the character in that sense. So, and then what they did at the end with the husband, that did not sit right. And then my final point, despite these characters being really bad, these are good performances. I think the performances of the actors are actually very good. It's funny, the best performance for me is Anne Mars, who plays the mother, who I cannot stand, but she plays that character really well. I think the parents give the best performance. The next one would be Hope Davis, who does her role okay. And then I didn't like Liev Schreiber or Parker Posey in this at all. But overall, the performances are good. With the script that they have, I don't think it matters so much because you're dealing with characters that I just did not like in the slightest. Okay, so who do I recommend this for? Well, if you want a reminder of 90s indie comedies, this is definitely one of them. This is probably one of the more well-known of those. So if you are hankering for that style of film again and you haven't had it for like decades at this point, yeah, go ahead, check it out. And then the other I would recommend it for is if you want a short film with some humor. There's some funny moments in this movie, but like this film is about an hour and 20 minutes. If you just want a film that is short with time to kill that honestly you will probably forget after you're done with it, Daytrippers is fine, I guess. Who do I not recommend this for? You've moved on from the 90s indie films. There's a reason why comedies aren't like this anymore. I guess they kind of got annoying to a certain extent. I don't know, but these are definitely films from their time. There are some things in this movie that I think a lot of younger people, I even think people now, my age, just not identify with and be like, why are they written like this? Why are they like this? So if you listen to this and go, yeah, I remember those films, they're not for me anymore, then yeah, you might want to avoid it. And then the last I would not recommend this for is if you want characters that are fully realized. These characters are paper thin. They are really thin. The main character, basically all she does is wonder what her husband's doing right now. That's essentially it. What all the mother does is nag. All the father does is say nothing. And then I can go on with the characters. They are what they do, and that is it. There's nothing deeper. There's nothing else behind the characters at all in this movie. If you're looking for interesting characters, they're not here in this movie either. Overall, I do not recommend The Daytrippers. I guess for its time, I can understand why this was a hit, why people like this film and they gravitated towards it, because it was a little different. The characters talked a little differently around that time. And just at the time in the 90s, we were more ironic. Now, when I watch this, I see a bunch of issues. The one big issue I also see in this movie is the ending. I'll put it this way. I won't spoil exactly what it is, but I don't mind ambiguous endings. I don't mind endings that don't wrap neatly. But this is the type of movie that didn't deserve that type of ending. This is a movie that I think if there was a more neatly wrapped ending, I think this would have ended up better. I don't know if I would have recommended it or not, but I think it would end up a lot better. Because the ending is the way it is, and what the revelation is, it just doesn't seem earned, and it just doesn't fit well with the rest of the movie either. Not that the movie is that good anyway. So I am not going to recommend The Daytrippers. It's on Criterion Collection if you want to buy it, but again, not my thing. I don't really like this movie very much.
Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.